Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay. Welcome to episode 140. I'm speaking with Catherine Mullan, who is the Animation Supervisor for MPC. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
All right, welcome to episode 140. So I'm excited for this episode. I think it's going to be really cool. I chat with Catherine Mullan, who is one of the animation supervisors for MPC. And Catherine was really cool. I really enjoyed this episode, just chatting and kind of shooting the shit about her career history and places that she's worked. A lot of the key insights that she shared over her career, and she's worked on a lot of amazing stuff. Everything from currently, I think she's working on Dumbo, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. She's done Monster Trucks, Spectre, Furious 7, Wrath of the Titans, X-Men First Class, Maleficent, Guardians of the Galaxy, Hunger Games, as well as Harry Potter, Happy Feet, and loads of other projects. So obviously has an immense amount of experience, and she really shares a lot of really great insights into working at MPC and a lot of career advice that she shares as well. There's so much great content in here, so I think this is going to be really fun. One thing I wanted to announce that I'm excited about is that I've been working on some brand new visual effects training that is only going to be available for the next 4 weeks. So this is your chance to get in there and get access while you can. This is going to be over 10 hours of free training. Typically, this is something that would cost about $1,000 to do as a course because it's quite dense, and we go through a lot of really high-end production visual effects, as well as learning to script in Python for artists. I go behind the scenes on how to shoot, scan with LiDAR, doing photogrammetry, a lot of stuff. But I'm doing a really cool visual effects shot, breaking it down through from beginning to end, doing this very kind of magical sci-fi elements and all the different parts of it. So really replicating a real visual effects production shot. So if you want to check that out, go to alanmckay.com/energyball, and there'll be a link to that in the show notes as well. But energy ball, one word. And I thought that'd be fun wordplay since I put out some training this time last year called Fireball, which was inside of the plane getting destroyed with all the pyrotechnics and everything else. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I've had so many people requesting this style of effects. So it's going to be really cool. Check it out while it's available, because it's not going to be available forever. It's only going to be for the next 4 weeks. I believe June 8 is when the doors close for this training. So that being said, I'm really excited to get into this episode. If you want to check out the show notes, just quickly go to alanmckay.com/140, so 140, and you can see all the key insights and key takeaways that Catherine and I share, as well as links and resources to everything that we talk about, quotes, everything else. So there's loads of really great content there as well. Okay, that being said, let's dive in. Yeah, I was wondering if you can quickly introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do.
Sure, yeah. My name is Catherine Mullan. I'm an animation supervisor at MPC.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And I was just kind of curious, because I feel like, for me, I'm always curious about how people get started in this industry, because I feel like everyone has a different story. Some people were just like, I watched Disney and I was obsessed, and I'm like, great, I'm going to get paid to do this. But others had a lot of resistance along the way as well. So I mean, for you, like, did you always want to be an artist in some form, or?
Not really. No, not that I didn't want to, but I didn't really know it was a job, I guess. I grew up in a small town in Ireland, and going through school, in the 90s, etc., there was you had some very obvious career paths ahead of you, and very obvious career paths that were spoken about. And, animation wasn't one of them. Right. Visual effects certainly wasn't one of them at that time. So for me, I never really knew what I wanted to do. I always enjoyed art. I was always liked to draw, and I always had an interest there. But I also was quite into maths, and the technical side of it. So for me, I never really wanted to go to art school because I felt like I was leaving other stuff behind, and I didn't solely want to just paint or draw. So for me, it was a weird one. And we had a careers library back in the days when, you know, there was no internet. And there was a book in our careers library and which allowed you to cross-reference different subjects. And at the time I was studying A-level, so so when you get to like kind of 16, 17, you choose 3 subjects, and I chose art, maths, and economics, which, you know, are just some random collection. Because I just enjoyed the subjects, you know, and cool. I liked my economics teacher, and, you know, it was just like these are the stuff that I enjoy. So, but then when it got to the point where you're like, well, what the hell are you going to do after? I had no idea. So, yeah, I wanted to do something technical, something around art, but also something around kind of maths. So anyway, I found this book, cross-referenced 2 subjects, art and maths, and it would show you kind of courses that you might be interested in. And there wasn't a lot of them. No. You know, architecture was, you know, the one that kind of came around, engineering. And then there was this one course which was called Computer Animation and Visualization in Bournemouth in the UK.
Right.
And I was like, what's that?
It's a real thing? Oh my God.
What is this computer animation? So I kind of dug into it a little bit, found out there was like an art center in Derry, which is near where I'm from. And I went, and there was like a guy there who had soft image, and they were doing a project, and I went in, and you know, he kind of introduced me to it a little bit, and I was like, wow, this is cool.
That's cool.
So I applied to the course and went off to Bournemouth and had an interview, and was accepted onto the course, and that was it. I literally I had so little idea what I was getting in for. So
I kind of feel like studying those 3 subjects, it could be like, well, do I want to make software? Do I want to just run a studio, or do I want to actually, you know, be in the trenches doing it? I mean, I think you've kind of created a lot of options for yourself. But I guess, like, for you, what was it like when you first kind of started there? Obviously not really knowing what to expect.
Yeah, it was you know, I was surrounded by a lot of people who knew about the course for a long time and had been gearing towards it for a long time. It was one of the few courses that were available, and it was, you know, there was a big demand for it, and it was quite hard to get in. So I found myself a little bit overwhelmed with lots of people who knew what they were doing, or it seemed like they knew what they were doing. I remember a good friend of mine now, I remember him helping me to like log on because, you know, I'd never really used computers before. And here I was at this like computer animation course. You know, I think the only time I'd use computers was like, you know, for word processing, you know, I'm going to type an essay and print it. And so
bit of a shift.
Yeah. So, and it was quite a technical course. You know, there was maths and programming, but there was, you know, and then there was like life drawing and what's hilarious, and when I look back at it now, and the first year that I was there, the software that we used was it was written by one of the lecturers.
Really?
And it was super basic, but you had to program everything. So, and obviously I didn't know any better, but you had to program your animation. So, you know, you're typing out, you know, move arm joint 20 degrees in the x-axis between frame 1 and frame 36.
I had a little taste of that back in the day. I think it was like 3D construction set or something, and I was like literally having to keyframe all the transforms, like, you know, via ASCII. So
so you know, it was crazy, you know, and you're everything, you're just writing everything. But, you know, even then in its most basic form, for me, animation was just like, you know, you press play and you're like, fuck, it moves. Oh, sorry.
Okay. You can say whatever you want. Yeah, that's awesome. I guess it hasn't really changed much in the years, has it? I'm kidding.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
In our second year, I remember we got Maya, and it was like, what? You can, like, you know, pick it up and move it and set keys, and wow, this is amazing.
It's such a dream at the time. I mean, what year was that you were studying?
I started in 1998.
Okay, great. So like literally when Maya came out. Yeah. Because prior to that, I mean, soft was always great. But yeah, I don't know. I I had a love-hate relationship with soft image, at least, back on the SGI days. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely everything. You look at animation back then. Like I kind of have a little bit of hate for everyone these days. It's like you don't understand how painful it was back then. Like people now complaining about like the GPU rendering being slow or whatever. It's like shaded viewports. That was like you're very lucky to even have that. But
Absolutely.
It's pretty interesting though to be able to study a subject and they're teaching you, I guess, not out of the box software, because I mean, again, it means that you're learning the concepts, but as soon as you go anywhere else, you're literally having to relearn again.
Yeah. It's it was definitely a great experience, and when I ended up working even as an animator, I had a very technical background as an animator, which most animators didn't have at that time anyway. But yeah, being able to just kind of understand the basics or well, the concepts behind it, the notes, the butts and notes, bolts and nuts.
I'm on the same page.
Yeah, but that they taught a lot of stuff that I've never, not sure if I've ever used, but I'm sure created a pretty good foundation.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. It's really cool. And yeah, I guess for you, like, what was your big turning point? Like, where you went from going to school to kind of getting your first big break?
I was pretty lucky, really. At the time when I graduated, 2001, there was stuff was happening, and they were crewing up in London, and the industry was really starting to grow. The university I went to, Bournemouth, had a pretty good relationship with the studios in London.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Framestore actually came down to the university and interviewed the students on site, and we were able to, we presented our work, and we had our degree show at Framestore, and I had an interview with the head of animation there, Mike Eames.
Did you tell him that you're gunning for his job?
Definitely was not gunning for his job at that time. But he was great, and he took me on board straight out of school. So I was very lucky in that I started as a junior animator. As soon as I took the summer off after my my studies,
of course.
started there.
Cool.
But it was amazing. But I remember, again, I started at Framestore being completely overwhelmed with, like, I actually have no idea what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrifying. And in the course itself, while it was technical and it taught you a lot of programming, maths, etc., it actually didn't teach you a lot of animation, and not a lot of animators come from that school. Mm-hmm. And what I learned was literally just by kind of observation and just trying stuff and doing stuff, and managed to cobble together some kind of project or reel that Mike saw something in. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, very different from schools now in animation that's taught. So yeah, I started. I knew
Again,
that.
I hate everyone from this. You go on CG Talk and there's like a 15-year-old just pumping out like amazing shit, and you're like, fuck you, fuck ZBrush, fuck everything.
It is, it is. It's incredible, and but there's so much information, available. There's some amazing schools. There's some not so amazing schools, but there's also just so much information available online, like the wealth of tutorials and even software and everything that you can just try out. It's incredible.
Yeah, lately the common thing that comes up is like, how do I get started? And I'm like, YouTube, like, what the hell, So I feel like there's maybe too much information out there these days. It's kind of a bit overwhelming for people, I'm sure. But yeah, no, it's definitely a different time. I mean, the fact that you had to go to a library and just kind of figure out like what occupations are out there, it's definitely changed. Now, if you just got banners of ads coming to, come to VFS, come to here, But no, that's really awesome. And I'm just curious, like, and again, this is more for everyone else, but like, do you have a sense of like what it was on your reel, or what it was that you demonstrated that the head of 3D kind of took a liking to you for?
I had done this. I remember my friend laughing at me at the time. I had taken it was a dialogue piece, and it was an excerpt from a book by Roddy Doyle, The Woman Who Walked Into Doors, and it was I don't know if you know it. It's a story of of domestic violence, basically.
And here you are laughing at it.
No, I know. Well, it's just, I'm laughing at myself, right? And
I'm just
so
giving you a hard time.
it was basically a dialogue piece, and I took some of the dialogue from his book, and a friend recorded the voice for me, and I had this woman sitting in a chair just kind of telling her story.
Wow.
So yes, my friend would laugh at me for my hard-hitting domestic violence documentary while everyone's
everyone else is doing Tom Hanks and
shooting each other.
Yep. No, that's really cool. That's really awesome. And yeah, I mean, again, like I'm always interested in that just because I feel like everyone does have different paths, and some people it's more like their parents were like, get a real career, like that's not a real job, and then there's other people, like I just interviewed Thierry Lafontaine, who's part of Schoolism, and he used to be a sommelier, like he would be a wine expert, and then along the way he's like, I want to be an animator now after 10 years of doing nothing but wine. So I love the fact that everyone does have a different path, and I feel like yours is probably more one of envy for everyone else, because just like not having too much resistance at the beginning. But
no, not at all. And I, from my parents, I had absolutely no idea what it was. I guess there was just some kind of faith in that, whatever direction I would go, it would be successful. But they never meddled at all. They didn't know what it was, but they were like, okay.
That's great. That's really cool.
See you later.
Have fun.
Have fun.
As long as you can pay for our retirement, we're all good.
Yeah. But it's interesting though, because obviously I work with a lot of people who've come from very different backgrounds, and I've interviewed a lot of people over the years who similarly they've had a completely different career, and then at one point they've just switched and decided to get into animation or visual effects or something different, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really cool. And I guess for you, like, what was your first project, and like, what was that experience like? Intimidating?
So absolutely intimidating. The first project was Dinotopia. It was called. It was this mini series of.
I vaguely remember.
It was,
well, yeah, because like CG was still like crude back then, so having dinosaurs in a TV show was like, oh my god. Plus, was Framestore and CFC merged at that point, or were they just about to?
They were just about to, yeah. So they were separate buildings, and but you knew they were linked, and I think it was in that first year or two that they merged into Framestore.
Right.
CFC.
That's cool.
Now just Framestore, right? So, but Dinotopia, it had the guy from Prison Break that everybody, all the girls drool over, was in it as this like geeky teenager. But yeah, and it was, interacting with all these dinosaurs. So, but as a junior animator, you're, basically you're kind of starting from a library of work that other people have done, and you're doing background characters, you're doing smaller shots, and thankfully, someone had asked me to do something big, I'm sure I would have ran away.
We've been saving the big T-Rex shot for you. Don't fail.
Yeah,
you got a day.
Please, no.
That's really cool. And I guess from there, like, I know you went to Animal Logic for a while down in Sydney. Yeah, so what was that like?
I loved it, and obviously
they had a lot of growing pains on that project.
From you being in Sydney, obviously living in Sydney, for me, going to Sydney for a year was like going on holiday for a year. It's just such a different environment, obviously, from what I grew up in all the places that I've worked. And there was a really great vibe. So I worked at Animal Logic at the time, so they had to pull people from all around the world. So it was a really international crew, which visual effects tends to be anyway. But that was particularly great because everybody had come together for this one project, and they're experiencing Australia for the first time, and it was such a great movie, like it was for Happy Feet, George Miller's Happy Feet, and it was a really fun movie to work on, and George Miller would do animation dailies, and coming from visual effects, like actually sitting in the room with the director and he's looking at your work and giving you feedback was really great, and nothing I'd actually experienced before.
Actually, what years were you there? Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. 2005, 2006.
Okay, yeah, I would have actually been on the lot because we're shooting Superman at the time.
Over at
Fox.
Way.
Yeah, because I would have lunch with a lot of the guys, and just hearing all the stories at the time, it'd be like they're now mocapping people as penguins and just like all the crazy stuff going on. It's just like, all right, like what entertainment am I going to hear today? But yeah, I think that like in a lot of ways that movie was very pivotal to Australia's industry because we'd already been doing a lot of live action films and things like that. But again, like I was actually meant to work on Happy Feet. Do you know Andrew Silk?
Yeah. Silky and Silky.
So yeah, good old Silky. He was trying to get me onto the project, and I just remember at the time thinking like, yeah, like Michael Twigg and those guys were saying it's about a year and a half to for the project, and I'm like, there's no way it'll be double at least, and ended up being about that. But yeah, I don't know, like I think the project itself, like obviously it was growing pains for the studio, but it kind of positioned a very big international crowd after that that got to kind of grow and stay. So yeah, I think it was really good for that. And yeah, I mean, so overall, like your experience in that, like what were the main things you were contributing to the project?
So we worked as an animator. We on that show. It's probably the only show kind of started with a motion capture base. There was a lot of keyframe shots depending on the action. But yeah, singing and dancing penguins. So yeah, I animated a lot of the baby Gloria stuff, which is pretty cute, and adult Gloria, lots of singing and dancing. So you're there at your desk listening to the soundtrack, singing along,
stuck in your head. Yep.
Lip syncing, lyrics, and it was great. It was a lot of fun, and the vibe in the studio was really cool, and I made some great friends there, and we did some cool trips and
cool.
But yeah, working with George Miller was particularly great, and he was really, really lovely man, really lovely character.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's always what I hear. Like the highlights of working on that project were especially just coming to Australia and getting to work with Miller because again he's a pretty visionary guy and yeah, I think this project was definitely for him, like not having directed in such a long time was probably a bit interesting piece to kind of approach. And that's really cool. And I'm kind of curious though, also like for you, let's say going to Framestore and then moving to the other side of the world, like I'm always curious about these sorts of things because I feel like there's a lot of people who want to entertain the idea, but then there's only a small percentage who are like, fuck yeah, I'm in. Like, I'm going to do something that's scary and intimidating, but could really change my life. So was that for you? Was there a lot of resistance or was it just like, hell yeah, let's do it?
No, it's definitely a hell yeah. For me, I've always loved to travel anyway, and I've always taken kind of breaks between projects and breaks between studying and using that opportunity to go out and see parts of the world. So yeah, it was like, wow, what we can like go and get a job in Australia and live there and they pay you and
there's free beer. Wait, okay, maybe not the last bit.
Hang on a minute. So yeah, no, I jumped at it, and at the time I was probably, I don't know, maybe even a little bit naive. I'd never felt any job insecurity. I started at Framestore straight out of school. I worked there for 4 years. And then it was like, hey, we can just go get a job somewhere else. Yeah, okay, and we did, and at the time it was cool. I went out with a couple of friends, so around a similar time, and so I arrived there. I already knew people, and like I said, it was everyone was kind of in the same boat, so it was a very welcoming bunch. It was a very welcoming crew because everyone was had come from somewhere, and there wasn't that many people who were actually Australian.
Yeah, we didn't have that. Like, there's only a pocket of studios up until around that time that were even in Australia, let alone doing like more long form animation. So it's definitely, that's why there's a huge call for bringing in international crew just to be able to handle a project like that because no one had really ever done it before.
Yeah. So how long have you been away from home? Have you lived there recently?
Quite a while. So I've only been back once in the last decade. I need to get back soon. But so it's kind of funny because I started working 96, 97, and then when around 2003 I moved to the States, and then from there I came back for a couple of years, but I've been living in Vancouver, Berlin, and mostly LA, a little bit of San Fran. So yeah, it's one of those things, like I love Australia to death, but it's just such a long flight. So
yeah. Yeah, and then that's the tricky thing, and I loved Australia and I loved the experience, but I was ready to
Mhm.
leave, and I did feel you just feel so far away from everyone else
Mhm.
in the world
I
because
was
you are.
I was talking to Bob Coleman, who was the animation director for ILM back in the day,
Mm,
and he was down there doing all the animatic stuff for Star Wars 2, Attack of the
mhm,
Clones, and because originally they were going to outsource the animation to like create a small studio down there, then they ended up just doing it all themselves. But I remember him talking about his kids, how they love going out to like Coogee Beach and Manly, and
mm,
they hadn't really grasped the concept of geography yet. So they'd gone back to San Francisco and they're like, "Can we go to Coogee this weekend?" It's like, it's
yeah,
not really. It's a little bit of a drive, you know.
yeah.
But that's really cool. And yeah, I guess at the same time, like you went from Framestore to diving down there, then back again. I stalked your LinkedIn,
Yep.
so but I mean, for you from there, you went on to MPC, which obviously you've
Mhm.
been at for quite a while. But what was it like? I guess like both with Animal Logic and NPC. I'm always kind of curious when, especially people who've been at one place for quite a long time, like what's it
Mm,
like going to a new environment and comparing that to how another place worked. Were they all kind of very similar? I do think that when you're in the same areas, like obviously London, Soho especially, is one of those very concentrated areas. So
mm,
typically, what people learn at one place carries on to the next. So I'm kind of curious,
mhm.
especially there, like how that would compare to the other places you've worked. If there's only like three to jump around to.
Yeah, I know, and I guess I'm kind of more limited than most in the companies that I have worked for. I think that they were really quite similar. Framestore and MPC, especially, and yeah, I don't see huge differences between, the similar pipeline, similar work, similar attitudes. It's
Hmm.
I don't, it's nice. It's nice to have the experience to kind of, see the different tools people are using and different ways of approaching stuff. But, I don't see a big difference between the studios myself. There's always going to be slightly different tools, slightly different pipeline, but it's really in the guts of the work. Doesn't really, those kind of things are periphery, to your day to day, different buttons to do the
Hmm.
same thing, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Yeah, no, that's really cool, and kind of curious too. With I guess all your experience so far. I mean, when we talk about projects, like what would be your all-time favorite project so far?
Um, oh, it's a tough one. Um,
You only get one. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, I'm joking.
well, early in my career, I worked on a few of the Harry Potter films, and at the
Mhm.
time, those were hugely enjoyable because they were, it was like my first film projects, and it was, this hugely popular Harry Potter franchise, and it was the first time film really came to London in
Yeah.
an animation, really. And the characters were great, and we were pushing it further than it had been pushed before, and being part of that was really great. But then I loved Happy Feet, and I loved Narnia, and it came down to the characters. Every project is challenging, but for me the most enjoyable projects have been the most enjoyable characters. So
Mhm.
Narnia, I loved working on Reapy Cheap, and then Maleficent was my first soup gig. So, and that was fantastic. We had
Mhm.
like lots of these fairy creatures and a big dragon, and so that I don't know, I can't choose one. It's like, what's your favorite child?
I know. Right? I was gonna use the analogy. If you have your favorite toy, you're like, nope, they're all mine.
Yeah, they're all mine. I'll take them all.
No, that's cool. That's really cool. And I guess what would be your most challenging?
Yeah. All of them. No, and it's a different projects are challenging for different reasons.
Mhm.
Some of them are challenging because the work and how far you're pushing it. Some of them are challenging for production reasons or the time that you have, or other one. You can have more challenging directors or um, so yeah, everything pushes buttons of some extent. I'm not sure there's been an easy one.
No, I hear you. I'm just kind of curious, like when you guys do all your animation work, like do you measure in terms of seconds of output per day, or like what's your the typical way? Okay.
No, and it's been very, that's a way that's very alien in film in my experience anyway.
Yeah.
But a lot of TV, it is seconds per day because I interview a lot of people who come from TV and they're like, yeah, my output is like 5 million seconds a day.
That's great. What's your good output?
Yeah, exactly. So no, like generally we work around a how long bid days, how long you think a shot will take in terms of days. And that's kind of what they gear the schedule around. But ultimately it's a guess because how long is a piece of string? Sometimes a shot can be taken in a completely different direction and round in circles and back again. And your best guess at the beginning of a project is only a best guess. So and you work until your director is happy and your clients are happy and it looks good, or the movie's out next week, so you have to stop.
Yep, or in hospital, one of the four.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I guess like for you with your experience, like you've obviously got a lot of experience both with I guess you can't really say Disney animation anymore, you'd say Pixar, but you know what I mean, but doing obviously more, let's say, Pixar-esque animation as well as creature animation. So I mean, for you, do you find that there's one that you prefer over the other, or is it more just just rock it out and follow the style that you need to put out?
Like for me, Happy Feet was the only feature animation that I ever worked on. And so my experience has been mostly in visual effects. But what's it's very different. Like there's a different kick out of it, I guess. The creature stuff is you really get to study the movement and physics and weights, and you watch the reference over and over and over, and you get to know the anatomy and the characteristics of a certain animal, and all of that is very cool and really exciting, and you get a real kick out of it looking good, and it looks real, and when it comes down to it's the believability of it being there, but what you're seeing more and more in visual effects now, which I love, is the character aspect of it. There's so many more characters in visual effects than there would have been in the past, and so rather than it just being, hey, there's a flying horse or a big scary beast, it's like, here's a character and he's the main character in your movie, and you
Don't
have
fuck
to
it
be, yeah, he's got to have soul, and you got to believe that they have a brain and they're thinking and they emote, and that stuff I love. I really get a kick out of character animation.
That's cool. Yeah, going back to Andrew Silk, did you ever see Cane Toad, that short film that he did?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
That was awesome. So him and Dave, both like they're best friends, and they did that. It was kind of interesting because that was definitely kind of the beginning of. They already had a successful career, but it was Brisbane, Australia, where there was literally 1.5 studios. So at the time, their career, shotgunned, and Silky went down to Animal. Dave went off to Weta, and it's kind of interesting because like right around that time, watching Dave, because I used to sit next to him, and I was surrounded by animators my whole career, so it's I'm kind of more get to appreciate what they're into than anything else. But yeah, it was kind of interesting because both of them loved doing more the I'll say Pixar animation, but then it was around that time that Dave started getting really obsessed with doing creature stuff, and then he went on to do Gollum, and kind of ended up just obsessing over more the creature realism, and rather than I guess Silky, who was more still enjoying doing more cartoon style characters and having fun with that. So it's kind of interesting just to kind of see them kind of pair off and kind of go their separate routes. But obviously there's very different challenges to each. One's more about believability, and one's more about I guess likability.
Absolutely, and you can see you can see in the projects like that we're doing more of these days, as well as a combination of both, like Jungle Book, obviously which was done at MPC, is it's kind of like taking these realistic creatures and making them emote and talk, and they have to be both. They have to be physically believable, but they have to be a character. They are the main characters in the movie. They're your storytellers, and All of that is then becomes equally important. But yeah, it's kind of it's blossomed in so many different ways, with feature animation and super wacky cartoon styles coming back, and actually you're seeing a lot more realism in feature animation and a lot more character animation in visual effects.
No, that's awesome. And I'm kind of curious too, like in terms of the way you guys typically work these days, is it more doing mocap or just complete keyframes? And again, it is per project, but I'm just kind of curious, let's say with like a live action film, whether it's more doing match move over someone else's performance, or like which are the ways that you guys tend to lean when approaching visual effects shots for, let's say, a realistic human or something that something that you can reference for.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I like the fact that you're able to actually make. I was going to just interrupt and say I like the fact that you can actually make sense of my early morning babbling right now. So I'm like, am I making any sense? But yeah.
Yeah, no. But yeah, no, absolutely. It completely depends on the project, and the projects are so varied in visual effects. Obviously there are a lot of human digi double type work that happens in visual effects to hard surface automobiles and planes, and then predominantly right now we're doing a lot of creature animation. But yeah, for human characters, I kind of feel, why wouldn't you motion capture it? You're never going to animate it as well as the motion capture of a human being. So, and you would spend weeks getting that subtlety that you need for it to be a believable human being. So yeah, motion capture it. But I find that there's not actually that many projects that require that, because if you've got a human being, why don't you just make it a human being? Film an actor. So I think I find that the majority of the work that we do in animation and at MPC is keyframe. I'd say about 95% of the work we're doing right now is keyframe animation. The majority of it is around kind of characters and creatures, and but we will absolutely, we have a motion capture studio in house, and I've used motion capture for creation of crowds and etc. before in the past, and you just wouldn't keyframe that stuff if you've got 200 characters cheering in a crowd. Like, why would you create 50 clips to do that when you could bash it all out and then we'll capture it in a day?
There's a studio in LA that I used to work with a lot, and they originally brought over all these animators from France and a few other places, big international crew, and it was to do all this massive Disney feature film project, and then that wrapped, and they really loved working at the studio, but from there they didn't really have much else to do other than a lot of mocap stuff. They had their own Vicon set up in the back. I think it was about 16 cameras at the time. So you have like these amazing talented character animators who are literally just animating hands and doing some facial shapes, and that's about it. And it's just like, this is not what I signed up for, you know what I mean?
No. So, and and there is a lot of resistance for animators. They don't want to use mocap, and because it's stealing the joy away from what they want to do, and what they want to do is create a performance and not tidy up fingers, and it's a very different job if you're kind of working on top of someone else's performance as opposed to choosing the performance yourself.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and whilst motion capture is an amazing tool, and it creates fantastic results, and I do understand why animators don't jump at the chance to work in a motion capture shoot.
Yep. Like, what are you gonna do now? Steal all my toys as well?
Yeah, and from the perspective of like, well, being an animation supervisor or hiring animators, when you see motion capture on someone's reel, it's very difficult to know what they did.
Yeah.
And they can say, oh, I threw away the performance and I started again, and you're like, yeah, right. I don't believe you.
Yeah.
But it's impossible to find out how much they added and how much is there already.
It's something I don't really want to comment on, but it's something that every animator I know at Weta is always cringing about, because you got on one side a certain performer who is going around bad-mouthing
Mm-hmm.
VFX the whole time, and then meanwhile they're literally like taking away most of his performance and recreating it, and then he goes on to say it's an entirely his performance.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, it's a
Yeah, and it's very disrespectful for the work that goes into it, and
Mm.
and there is that the flip side of it. Well, you can start with a particular performance, and as soon as it's in a shot, once a director knows that performance can be changed, and if they want something different, they'll ask for something different, and then it does change, and that does fall into the hands of the animator.
Googling. I can't believe I'm doing this. I was thinking of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, just completely flip side, but I can't believe I'm spacing on. Is it Kurt Douglas? No, I'm totally butchering his name. This is why I have to Google really quick before I embarrass myself further. But
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know, right? And anyway, well, all I was gonna say. I thought it was really interesting that Kurt Douglas, where the hell am I
Kurt
going
Russell,
from?
yeah.
Kurt Russell. I'm still going to edit that out. I'm kidding. But Kurt Russell, I thought was really brilliant. I forgot the studio who did the digital makeup to make him younger, but he went on like this big spiel about you don't need CGI, you just got to get like go old school, and he's got the best makeup guy in the biz and all this stuff, and he was saying this to one of the artists who actually did all the digital makeup for him. So I think she was saying like, what did you think of the work we did? And he completely just like destroyed visual effects in that one moment, saying we don't need that, and he had no idea that how much work had been done to his performance just to mimic it.
No, absolutely. And I think part of it is that people don't know how much work goes into it, but also some of the press around it isn't always truthful. And I remember years ago when I was working at Framestore, we worked on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and there was this sequence with lots of squirrels, and they kind of jumped down, and the team, I didn't work on it myself, but the team were animating, like there was maybe 20, 30 squirrels in this sequence, and I remember there was like some article came out afterwards about the trainer of the squirrels, and how they trained up all these squirrels to do all these amazing things, and you're like, really? Yep. Can't you give credit where credit's due? And that's a little disappointing.
I thought it was pretty pivotal at the time with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? If you remember that movie.
I do, yeah.
I love that film. And there's a bit where this Babyface, I think, is driving a car down a road and he hits a cow and runs over it. And I forget who the sector was, but the animal cruelty people. Man, I'm so early in the morning. I'm barely piecing together my words. But like they end up going to the studio wanting to sue, saying like you killed a cow, and so Digital Domain had to literally put together a presentation of how they made the cow to show that no cow was harmed in the making. And again, it's kind of like, especially back then, I think it's kind of hats go off for doing such a believable performance that people don't even question it. But it is kind of interesting when literally the credit is going to the wrong people because you've done such a good job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, you just don't know what's real anymore, and from advertising to movies to, the work that goes in, even, the slimming work that goes into movies, and patching people's faces, changing lipstick colors, this kind of stuff is
replacing people's mustaches.
Replacing mustaches.
Oh, you haven't heard about that? So in the
I think I might have heard something.
Justice League, Superman, they again, I'm so terrible with names today, so I'm not even gonna try. But
they did reshoots.
So no, it wasn't even reshoots. It was contractually. This is a battle between Paramount and Warner Brothers, I believe.
Yes.
And contractually, Henry Cavill. Google again. Henry Cavill had signed a contract to grow out a big bushy mustache for doing the next Mission Impossible, and of course he was doing Superman role right before that. So there was a big back and forth about, well, can we shave off the mustache and then grow it afterwards? And just to be dicks, I think Warner Brothers was like, no, like we take ownership over this. You need to do it. And even I think Paramount, I'm pretty sure it was Paramount, or I'm way off. I think it was the other way around. Sorry. Yeah, it's the other way around. So Warner Brothers offered to pay the money to do a CGI mustache and facial hair and all that, and they were just fighting him the whole time, giving a lot of resistance. So I thought it was really hilarious because instead of adding a mustache, which is easier. Instead, they had to do a complete digital face from
Yeah.
down below. And for the most part, like it feels like something's wrong, but
Yeah.
it's not too bad. But there's one shot at the beginning which was clearly done by a different studio, and it looks terrible. And because of that, it kind of sets the standard of look at this guy's face for the rest of the movie. So I think if that hadn't been done, it was like, you know, there might have just been something off. But yeah, you know, it's just kind of interesting to see those little things. I used to work for a studio in LA that we would get this all the time. You get certain celebrities who, like, let's say it was a Lakers game, because they stream it, you know, 4 hours later. So what would happen is they would cut to someone in the audience, so I won't say names, but I don't think it really matters anymore. But, you know, they would wave at the camera, and as soon as the camera cuts away, their PR people would want that footage right away. They'd send it out to us. I had nothing to do with this, but they would go and like digitally warp in their goiter or fix up their neck or whatever it is, and then send the footage back out to be live that night. And it's just amazing. You don't even think about that stuff, that you're watching a basketball game or whatever, and it cuts to someone who's waving the audience, and then there's like this rush to get like all this digital makeup done just so that way they look attractive, and, you know, just for their little 2-second wave on screen. So it's amazing.
It's insanity, you know. It's awful, like the whole body image, and like people are people, and you know, to kind of put up those false perceptions of what someone looks like is just so damaging. It's crazy.
Yeah, it just blows my mind. But I mean, I guess it's the world we live in. I'm curious too, with all your experience, both having math background and obviously going to school where you would have done more traditional art, and I assume you probably have a bit of an art background too. What do you think is so relevant these days? I mean, obviously you go back 10, 15 years, like if you were looking to hire an animator,
20.
I'm not saying you specifically, I'm just saying the industry. But yeah. But the traditional requirements you would see on a job post would be like must have traditional animation experience and great at posing. You know, there'd be a lot of requirements that were very specific to having that kind of background. Whereas same thing with, let's say, being a technical director or an effects person, you typically would have to have more of a bachelor in science or some kind of math background. But how do you feel these days? Do you think it's still a requirement, or is it just you got to be badass keyframer and that's what matters?
Yeah, nothing matters, you know, apart from the work you're presenting. You know, I like getting an interview in the first place is based solely off of your reel. And if I interviewed someone for a job at MPC, like it would be probably only the last minute before I would go into an interview where I would check what they'd done before.
Right.
You know, because it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you've studied. It doesn't matter where you've worked. It matters what the work on your reel looks like and how good it is, which is fantastic. You know, there's an incredible amount of freedom around that where, you know,
you can't
you're
do that as a doctor.
No. But there's no judgment. You don't have to go to a certain school. You don't have to spend a certain amount of money. You don't have to be from any particular background or any particular country, or, you know, it's, you know, it's very liberating. You know, you're judged solely upon the work that you can do and your talents, and that's how it should be, you know, in my opinion.
No, I think it's great because I mean, I'm a big fan of people and having excuses for why they're not where they should be, and it's a big fan in terms of being very anti it. But I do feel like there's a lot of people like, oh well, I didn't get the job because of this, or I'm a girl, or I'm from this country, or whatever it might be. But I feel like in this industry, and I felt this way literally like 20 years ago, you know, that even in my teens, I could see it like this is such an open door for anyone, like no matter sex, race, anything other than just if you've got a shitty reputation, it's such a small industry that that can come back and bite you in the butt. Although these days, my opinion is that you could be the biggest a-hole in the world and somehow you still manage to get work. So it's proved itself many times. But yeah, I do think that it's really based on the quality of your work, and I love that. Opposed to, you're right, like what school did you go to, or anything other than like what you can do. And I think the biggest thing most people don't, I think, realize that it's more about hiring people is a gamble, and it's very expensive because it's very time consuming to get people in. And also if you're not good, it's not like I think that a lot of people think of it like, well, I'll go in and I'll be really cheap, so it won't be a big deal. But typically the people who are managing you are not cheap, and the more time you're taking for theirs, like it multiplies. So I do think that, the fact that you can prove that you can sit down tomorrow and do the work is all that really matters,
Yeah, absolutely. And and I like to be able to help people who are starting out as well, and everybody's got somewhere to grow to, and that's at every level. And I love to see someone coming in who doesn't have much experience, but they've got a great attitude and they're willing to try, and they'll work off their own bat to make it better and better. And and there's a passion there, and I'll have so much more time for that person than an ego.
That's right.
Someone who thinks they know it all, and you got to be humble, and you got to search for the feedback and ask for it, and I think there's a lot of people willing to give it, and but attitude is key, absolutely. But yeah, it doesn't matter at all, from my experience, where you are, where you've come from,
Unless you're Australian, because they're a bunch of criminals, apparently.
Yeah.
And
or Irish, because they're a bunch of drunks.
Actually, it's kind of funny because I just moved out of LA about a year ago, and just because I realized like all the work I'm doing is remote anyway, so I don't think it would really matter that all my clients are either down the street or a couple hours flight. But I ended up moving into this small street where my neighbor across the street from me moves in right away. He's from Ireland, used to work for Intel, now he works for Autodesk. So I just thought it was hilarious that like my next door neighbor is like a product manager for a lot of major Autodesk products. I'm like, oh man, you can't escape it. Actually, I've got a lot of friends from Ireland, but I feel like it's like Australia. It's like, oh, you're from Australia. Do you know Tom? And it's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Places. But the shitty thing is you do know Tom, and then it's just...
Yeah. You're like,
but,
of course I won't know that person. Oh, yeah, I do.
But I got a few friends over there that have been doing 3D for quite a long time, like John O'Connell, which again, I feel like is like John Smith of American names. But
in there as well.
That's right. But yeah, everywhere I go, it's just like it seems like it's such a small knit industry over there that everyone knows everyone. So no matter where you are in the world, it's like, oh, I was just getting drunk with him the other day. So like Rory Robinson's obviously feature film director these days over here. He came from doing 3D over there and got an Oscar nomination, I think in 2001. So yeah, there's a few good Irish people coming out of the industry for sure.
It's kind of, I find it a little bit sad because I've never actually worked in Ireland, and unless you count working in the local newsagents. But yeah, I went straight from home to university in England, and then I've worked in London and Sydney and Vancouver, and I've never worked at home. So it's which is a little sad. And I recently went back. It's such a small industry there, but it is kind of growing. And I went back home, and I was there in December, and I did a talk at the local university in Belfast.
That's cool.
And they have a course there that's been running just for a few years, and it was great. It was really great to go there and be like, hey guys, you can do this too. You just there's nothing stopping you. There's no reason why you can't do this.
That's right.
So yeah, that was cool. It was good. But yeah, maybe one day.
But yeah, I think that's really pivotal too. I think most people don't realize that they can do this, and there's a bit of a disconnect, or they kind of need that permission from someone to say like, just go do it. And then it's like, oh, okay, like that seems really difficult, but then you start looking into it, it's like, no, you literally just got to do it. It's just like anything else. With you and again, like having a lot of experience hiring, I mean, what do you think are some of the big red flags that come up a lot when interviewing? Because I always find this fascinating, because I think that most people are so fixated on, if I have a badass reel, or if I know how to push all the right buttons, then that's all that matters, which I think is true in terms of being able to prove what you can do. But at the same time, I think most people aren't aware of like how easy it is to put one bad piece on your reel, or whatever it is going to cost them the job, or say the wrong thing at the interview. And yes, I mean, I'd be curious to see like what your insights are, and so like how people have kind of drastically failed an interview or an application. Without naming names, obviously.
No, not at all. I think honestly, I think it's really hard to completely screw up an interview. I think if the work is good and you're not a complete a-hole, the likelihood is most people aren't, right? And so you're not going to screw up that badly. But there have been occasions. I do remember interviewing once a guy, and he, he was kind of he was maybe about 10 years my senior, and he had on his CV that he had worked as a lead, and I remember walking into the interview, and this was maybe about 4 years ago, and I went into the interview, or it was a Skype interview, and spoke with him, and he just started, he was just dissing. I asked him about his lead position, and he turns out he wasn't actually a lead, but he should have been a lead because he had way more experience than everybody else on the team. And
I got more gray hairs than everyone, so that validates me.
And these young people come in, and they've got no experience, and then suddenly they're the lead or the supervisor, and I'm I'm sitting there, and I'm probably 10 or 15 years younger than them, interviewing him for a job, and it's like, really, this is what you're going to talk about? You think this is a good way to go? So yeah, I think going into an interview and being
just shutting up is probably the safest place, because if you actually, I'll interrupt for 1 second to say that, like, again, going back to what you were saying about how there is so much equality with this industry because it is based on what you can do. Like, I feel that transpires over to interviews too, because most of the time there are a few studios that are the differentiator here, but most studios, if you're in the interview, it's because they're literally just, you're screening someone just to make sure they're not a dick, because at the end of the day, like, you're going to be doing a lot of late nights, and you want someone you can have a beer with, and they're not going to have tantrums or tell everyone how great they are all day long. But if you're in the interview, it's most likely because you've got the job, and it's just more about, like, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, figuring out money, and just getting a good, just quick screen of, like, what their personality's like. So I think if you just go in and you just smile and nod and make a few jokes, you're good. But it's the people who, like, give a little bit too much inside are the ones who Xing themselves out.
Yeah, like I think it's probably harder for more entry level positions, because you would, you may have a tendency to interview more people and then see what's out there before you would kind of move ahead. But I think showing enthusiasm, and being humble and recognizing where you are, and where you need to go is a good thing to do, and just be being relaxed, being a person. I think from my experience, that the interviews that I've done and I've had, well, I've only had two, but ever, but they're generally, it's a relaxed industry. It is just about kind of having a chat, finding out who you are, what makes you tick, and what your experience is and what you've done, and getting a sense of what someone can do. So, I don't think it's something to be anxious about, where people are starting out and going into walking into an interview. You don't need to be scared or anxious about it. The majority of the time, the person receiving you is just looking to get to know you a little bit.
That's right.
I did interview for an internship once where it was a Skype interview, and this kid, and God bless him, he was he came with the suit and the tie, and he was, he stood up in the Skype, and you could see 3/4 of his body, and he's standing there in his posture, and he was so serious. Like, wow. It's okay. It's okay. Relax,
it's like, do your research. You actually lose points for not doing a bit more research. Where's your Pixar shirt? But yeah, again, just kind of going over that a little bit more. But I mean, are there any other ones that you can kind of like point out in terms of, like, as you said, not bad mouthing other people, not being negative, or clearly showing a lot of angst towards other people, like, I'm better than everyone.
Or the industry itself. Oh, I hate this and I hate that, and we should demand more money, and we should do this, and just the spiel, that people like to get angry about. It's kind of, it's not for an interview.
Yeah. That's the thing too, and again, this is more to do with managing teams, but all it takes is like one bad apple. Like, I've seen up to like 5 or 6 people like leave a team because of one person, and they're like, I keep hearing it so often more recently, but like I think that at the end of the day, like, you've got your soft skills and your hard skills, and that is that you're going to hire people based on what they can do, but more importantly, how they mesh with everyone else. And all it takes is that one person. Like, I had that, probably the last project I supervised in LA, I had this one guy who's just extremely negative about everything, and to the point where it's like literally like nothing, can be done. Like CG sucks, and it's either Canada's taking all of our jobs or North Korea is going to bomb us any day. Those were pretty much every morning I'd walk in the room and be like, what is it today? It's going to be one of these two things. So, and that just doesn't make life pleasant. Whereas you got everyone else who's like, hey, I stopped by the bagel store and bought everyone bagels, or whatever you can do to put a smile on everyone's face. Because at the end of the day, it is a brutal industry. We put in a lot of long hours, and we want people around that are all going to have each other's backs, not be, the Debbie Downer trying to make everyone else.
It's such a drain, when someone is very vocally very unhappy, and it does put a drain on the people who are surrounding them, and it drains the energy out of everybody else as well. And and not that people shouldn't be vocal if they feel like something's not right. It's got to be kind of an open environment to be able to talk and discuss about stuff. But it's also that thing where if just like give it a break, like
go for a beer, come back, and reset.
It's important. The environment that we work in is important, and for me particularly, one of the things that I love about the industry the most is the people that I work with, and the experience on the floor, and it's one of the greatest things about working in visual effects are the people. So it's no Debbie Downers.
Should be on the doorways you go into the interview. I'm just got like one or two more questions, but again, I definitely want to pick your brain in terms of what others, especially if they're trying to get into the industry or especially trying to really level up where they're at, just ways to, like, let's say, I feel like animation is definitely one of those like really saturated industries. There's a lot of people who want to get into animation, and for you, like, how do you think of some ways that people can or do stand out from the crowd when it comes to applying or just typically demonstrating what they can do?
I think it's kind of if you know what you want to do, then you should hone your reel to what it is that you want to do. For obviously visual effects and a lot of the work that we're doing, a lot of heavy creature animation, a character animation also, but it's very much about realism and believability, and there's a certain style of animation that is more geared towards feature animation. So, and it's very difficult to then kind of look at super cartoony animation, of a lot of talky talk reels, land on our desks, and which isn't
second clubs
very a lot of it, and I get it, I understand why people are going there and they enjoy that type of work, and that's cool. But if you're applying for a job at MPC, for example, or another visual effects studio, that's probably not going to get you a job. So if you want to do that type of work, then, do some creature animation, use reference. Like I couldn't, it blows my mind when people think they know how something moves. And I think that goes for lots of different disciplines as well. It's like if you're not looking at reference of whatever it is you're doing, then your work's not going to be very good. Your work's not going to be as good as it should be.
Plenty of floaty explosions out there that look more magical than
right. Exactly, magical pixie dust.
That's right.
So whether it's effects or modeling, or you're an artist or a painter, it's you have to be looking at that reference, and visual effects is recreating reality. Then you need to look at reality, and you need to look at those performances, and you need to look at how the physics of something moves, and anatomy, and all of that stuff is super duper important.
That's cool. That's really
cool. So yeah, like, definitely gear your reel towards the job you want, and if you're an animator, or you want to be an animator, like don't spend your time modeling. Don't render your animation. I don't care. And like I don't need you to model and rig your own character or creature. If you want to, that's great, but if you want to animate and you only want to animate, then use a free rig. Get a free rig off the internet. There's plenty of them available. Pick a piece of reference and make some animation that that looks great.
To put you on the spot, sorry to cut you off. Like, to put you on the spot, is there any rigs in particular that you would recommend that are floating around? I'm still out of the loop because I don't even know if High End 3D is around anymore. Any of those websites. But...
Do you know? I actually don't know. I know there are some because I see a lot of reels that use the same rigs.
Yeah.
You know, so I imagine it wouldn't be too difficult to find them. But you know, my own need for a free rig off the internet has been quite limited. so unfortunately, I can't help there. But you know, I think, you know, that people kind of widely are make them available, and you know, even if you look at other people's reels and you see. If they're using rigs, then, you know, ping them a line and ask them if, you know, where they got it or if they would share it or, you know, I think a lot of people as well, you know, I've seen kind of posts where someone is a rigger and they want someone to do animation on their rig so that they have you know, they can showcase it. So there's opportunities to pair up with other people as well, and which is great and shows kind of like a team spirit, a team environment, which is definitely more like what the reality is. Right?
That's brilliant. Because, yeah, let's say character TD work, I mean, I feel like they've got one of the hardest jobs out there just in terms of being able to get consistent work if they're not at like a studio that is able to bring on like an army to stay for a whole production. Otherwise, you're usually in at the beginning and then you're out. But especially just breaking in the beginning, like you're right, like being able to demonstrate how your rigs work and what you can do, even getting the experience, because you need to know, if you're not an animator, then you need to know what an animator needs, and that's like the hardest thing if you're not getting that feedback. So it's brilliant actually to go and seek out TDs or character TDs or vice versa. Have a character TD seek out animators saying like, hey, do you want to test out my rig? So that's actually a really great idea.
Absolutely, and it's a you know, it's such an important relationship, you know, the animation and rigger relationship, and you know, the feedback, you know, back and forth is, you know, is only going to make the TD stronger and the rigger stronger, and you know, and having the kind of the knowledge of different rigs and what works and doesn't work for as an animator is also really important. So yeah, no, definitely do that.
Cool. I guess two quick last questions, but kind of following on from what we were talking about being really specific about what you can do and what you can demonstrate. Have you ever had anyone, like, again, I've totally stalked your IMDb and LinkedIn, so you know, I know that you're at Dumbo in production right now. So let's say, I hope I'm not creeping you out. So let's say,
no, God, no. I stalked you too. It's okay.
So let's say with that. Would you find, like, has anyone ever said, like, notice that, like, your studio, let's say MPC or Framestore, is working on a specific thing and gone and created custom animation specifically for a type of project that you guys might be doing? Have you experienced that much at all?
Like a little bit around, you know, after Jungle Book.
Right, okay.
Mostly after Jungle Book, you know, where people were pretty blown away by the work, and they were like, oh, you know, I really want to do creature animation, and they would go off and find a tiger. So I think I've seen more tigers on reels in the last year than I have done big cats, you know, since they knew we were doing Lion King, you know, lots of big cats on reels, which is great. You know, it's like it shows a little bit of foresight, and it's, you know, and that's, it's like you're tailoring to a specific project. Which is great. You know, you can show that you can do that work, and you show that you have the ability to I don't know, to think ahead and to kind of show, well, this is what you need. I can show you that I can do it. Absolutely, and I think that's fantastic. Not to say that, you know, other creatures can't be, you know, you've got a big cat doesn't mean you're automatically going to get a job on Lion King, but it'll show that you can do creature animation, you know. And
my cat's so awesome it flies, it doesn't walk because
yeah. And no one has done any flying elephants yet, though.
Actually, I used to do a lot of character animation, but it was more video game stuff, and then, you know, so for me it was always the battle of, like, should I do effects or animation? And effects was something I always had more of a natural ability with, and but I just remember there was like a tiger that we had to animate, and it was for this Konami, a Japanese game client. And I just remember originally we had animated this like really nice animation, and then they'd basically come along, picked up here's my iPhone, picked up an object and be like, and it's pretty much like delete all keyframes and have like two key, it's just simplifying everything. It's just like there's nothing more heartbreaking than like spending a week trying to get the perfect couple hundred frames and then break it down to just
yeah.
But
I know it is. It's tough. There's your vision, and then there's the director's vision, and ultimately the director is.
That's right. They're the one paying
the director.
bills. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess like final question I have is more to do with more observation, but I'm just curious, like with everyone that you work with everyone that you supervise, I mean, what do you find is the kind of differentiator between those who are good and those who are great? Do you find that there's just some natural kind of tendencies that pop up? Either some people are just obsessed enough to kind of give it everything they've got, or they're perfectionists, or maybe they're not perfectionists, so they can actually get their work finished. Like, what are the things that you kind of notice, characteristics in people that really do make them kind of stand out from the crowd?
Definitely there is a passion there to make it look as good as possible, and a willingness to just kind of to find that, because it's hard, and it's, but there's certain people that I work with, and it's, you'll pass off the most difficult task, and that they will work at it until it looks awesome. And that's, I think it comes from, it's not a that's good enough attitude. It's this has to be real, this has to be great. And they love it, and they enjoy it, and they're passionate about making it the best that it can be. So I think there's a huge part of it is attitude and how good you want something to look. And there's, a huge part of it is wanting the feedback because you want it to look as good as it can look, rather than I don't want the feedback because I can't be bothered to do the revisions, I just want to get it approved so I can move on and do another one,
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that kind of sets people apart, is like, is it the best it can possibly be? It's the person who'll sneak back in and do an adjustment after it's been approved, just because, it's going to bug the shit out of them.
Yep.
Or they'll come and ask you, I saw something in a lighting render and I just want to fix this one thing. Can I, those are the people who are worth their weight in gold.
But it's so true though, because there's times like you'd be at the bar or something and a commercial comes on and you're just like, they fucked up the comp, like they used the wrong element, and but that's just it. Like whatever it is, if you're looking at your work with regret later on, like I could have done better, then you should have done better. And I think that hopefully everyone ends up taking ownership of their work somewhere along the way, because I think that it is such a big aha moment when you start to look at things like, when this gets approved, when it goes out, then when it's finalized, it can never change again, and all these people are going to see it, and it's going to be like this for the rest of time. So it's up to you to give it the best it can be, and make it the best it can be. So
absolutely. I think it's tough, because obviously, we're working in an environment where things, have to be pushed along, and you have to let go, and you can't polish forever, and but there, there's definitely people who want to polish forever, and people who want to get rid of stuff as quickly as possible. And you're better. You're better more towards the one than the other.
I'd hope so. No, that's awesome. And I guess for anyone who wants to find out more about you, where can they go? Is there anywhere online? You have a website or?
No. I've just been buried in a little cocoon at MPC for 10 years. I don't really have a profile, or I have my LinkedIn page, of course, but it's basic as well. But I don't have a website. I don't even have a reel online. I'm
Cool. No, this has been great. So I appreciate you taking the time out to chat. It's been a lot of fun.
But I'm really enjoying I've been going back and listening to some of your podcasts and stuff. It's been great.
Okay, I want to thank Catherine for taking the time out to chat. This was really fun. And again, I think there was so much really great content that we discussed in here. Next episode, I'm going to be talking to Adam Holmes, who's one of the layout supervisors for Sony ImageWorks. And Adam's worked for a lot of different places, from obviously Sony to Lucasfilm, Digital Domain, Imagi, Disney, and more. So it's really cool chatting to him, just kind of getting a lot of his insights into the visual effects industry, especially layout, but also some interesting things like how he negotiated to work on Superman Returns in the live action area in production. So I thought that was kind of cool. I was on set as well at the time as a liaison between Warner Brothers and Frantic Films, who's one of the vendors. So it's kind of cool. Just like a lot of us were down there in Sydney, Australia at the time. And it was kind of interesting just kind of discussing that, where he came from doing visual effects to actually being in the production with Mark Stetson, Thomas Siegel, obviously Bryan Singer, and a lot of the Warner Brothers team at Fox Studios in Sydney. So yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff. So I think this is definitely an interesting episode, one worthwhile checking out, if not all of them, I hope are worth checking out. So that will be up next week. And like I said, this visual effects training is only available for a little bit of time. If you want to check it out, it's completely free, but it's only available until June 8th. So go to alanmckay.com/energyball and you'll be able to download it there. Otherwise, check out the show notes, alanmckay.com/140, so 140 for episode 140, and I'll have links to it there as well as to everything else discussed in this episode. Okay, I'll be back next week with Adam Holmes. Until then, rock on.